Okay, you're ready to go, Ian. Introduce
Okay,
yourself.
thank you. Okay, my name's Iain Robinson. I'm the owner of a woodland that will be cut down to make way for the Norwich Western Link. I've been campaigning on this issue since about 2018 and working closely with people like Andrew and David as a result of that. So I'm going to talk to you today about the woodlands, about woodland ecology, and about the impact the road will have on biodiversity, really to give you a sense of what's at stake with this road. I think ideally we would have planned to have some of you come and visit the woods, but obviously things being what they are at the moment, this will be hopefully the next best thing. So the section of woodland I own with my family is part of a larger area of woodland, and on the map on the screen at the moment you can see how the road goes through and past that woodland. That larger area of woodland's been divided up into 3 or 4 acre compartments of ownership. There are 12 compartments in total, and together we formed a collective of small woodland owners called the Wensum Woodlanders. And we're sandwiched between 2 large estates. So the lands of 2 large estates, Ringland Estate on the right hand side and Morton Hall Estate on the left. Most of us purchased these small woodlands to enjoy with family and friends, to engage with small scale forestry activities like coppicing or woodland crafts, or simply to look after in order to encourage wildlife and to enjoy that wildlife. So the section of woodland I own is in an area called Rose Carr. Rose Carr sits on the edge of the Wensum floodplain, and as the name Carr indicates, it is, or at least it is in part, an area of wet woodland. It contains a large pond which is fed by the River Wensum, which is a watering place for birds and mammals, and an area in which sort of toads and frogs have often been seen. Most of Rose Carr will be destroyed completely by the road as it comes through it. The photos here show the River Wensum in flood, and you can see the amount of water there. We often have deer tracking through the woodlands to go and drink at this water, and the road will essentially sever the routes that those animals take down to the water. So these woods are part of a wider dynamic landscape. Rose Carr sits next to the River Wensum, and I've got there sort of yellow marks. We've got the River Wensum Special Area of Scientific Interest, which is a whole river designation, and we've got the River Wensum Special Area of Conservation. And why is it special? Well, it's a chalk river, and chalk rivers encourage diverse aquatic plants, which then supports a wide range of invertebrates, which then supports a wide range of fish species. So it's particularly rich. I think there are something like 200 chalk rivers worldwide, and 85% of them are in the UK. So they are globally important. This picture taken from the edge of my wood, it shows where the 750-metre long viaduct would cross the Wensum. So more or less where the red arrow is pointing to is where the A1 067 is, and the viaduct would cross from there directly towards the oak tree on the left, and would land where my wood would be on a large embankment. You can imagine that the disruption in constructing such a viaduct would be quite extreme. it would need to be supported on pillars that would need to be anchored onto the bedrock. One can't really imagine how they will construct this without it impacting these special areas. Trees like these in Rose Carr will be among the many ancient and veteran trees felled along the route. Many of these trees have been registered in the ancient tree inventory. I did a lot of that work myself last winter. The ancient tree inventory is run by the Woodland Trust. It doesn't really offer the trees any kind of protection, but at least it means that they are on the map, as it were, and can't be ignored. The oaks in these photos are between 200 and 300 years old. Different tree species are considered veteran at different ages. So a short-lived tree might be considered veteran or ancient sooner than a longer-lived tree like the oak. And it's measured largely by features on the tree, such as hollows or decaying wood. You can see on the oak on the left, there's a lovely kind of hollow there. And the oak on the right, you can see quite a lot of sort of decaying branches. These are all important identifiers of veteran and ancient trees. So next to Rose Carr, there's an area of woodland called Primrose Grove, and the two woodlands are linked by another area of woodland called the Nursery. Primrose Grove will be heavily impacted by the very close proximity of the road, and it's an area of ancient woodland. This wood contains many trees with the characteristics favoured by the Barbastelle bat. It's quite a shady wood, and again, this shadiness and the fact that it's somewhat neglected and unmanaged means that it kind of has the shadiness and untidiness that the bats like. And a maternity colony of this protected species has been identified here, along with numerous roost trees. I'll say more about this later in the presentation. This heat map on the left, it shows the height of trees. So the red areas and the orange areas are the higher trees here. Now, height isn't necessarily an indicator of age, but it is an indicator of maturity. So you can see here how the road would be going through some of the tallest and most mature areas of woodland, such as Rose Carr, the Nursery, which you can see there in the photograph in the centre, and Long Plantation on the right. So I'm going to give you some examples of why mature woodland is important for biodiversity, using the oak tree as an example. So there are 2,300 species associated with the oak tree, 320 of which are only found on oak trees, and 229 species of which are rarely found on any species other than oak. These species might include, all sorts of invertebrates, all sorts of insects, butterflies, moths, etc. But also, we have listed there 324 different species of lichen associated with oak trees. And you can imagine as a tree ages, it becomes sort of fertile ground for lichen to grow on. Veteran oaks host a complex variety of insects and lichen, and the decaying wood in veteran trees make ideal homes for insect larvae. If you find an oak where the bark has come away, you'll often find lots of insect holes in it. Veteran oaks are more likely to host a complex variety of insects, providing food then for birds and bats. The holes and crevices in the tree bark are perfect nesting spots or roosting spots. So bats might roost in old woodpecker holes, under loose, flaky bark, or in cracks and hollows, as well as feeding on the rich supply of insects in the tree canopy. So when the bats emerge from their roost, one of the first things they'll go and do is feed off the insects that are flying in amongst and over the trees. Such trees really are habitats in their own right. So never let anyone tell you they are just trees and can be replaced and replanted. When you lose a veteran tree, you also lose all the life it supports. I can't stress that enough. They're not just trees, they are habitats. Carbon stores and sequestration. As you'll obviously be aware, woodland absorbs and locks up carbon from the atmosphere, but it does so more effectively in mature established woodlands. And felling the trees releases the already stored up carbon if that wood is then burned or left to rot. Usually this would happen in a kind of a fairly managed way. So you're not releasing any more carbon into the atmosphere than is being regrown. But if someone comes along and just fells an entire wood, that's not going to be the case. And a newly created woodland would not really prove to be effective in that carbon sequestration, or as effective as the mature woodland, until it itself matures, until it's 30, 40, 50 years down the line, and those trees really start to gather pace and energy in the way that they grow and lock up that carbon. So I'm going to talk now about impacts on biodiversity. You can see there 2 images I've stolen from the Stop Campaign website. And the one on the left is taken by a drone over the affected woodlands. And the image on the right is obviously a visualization of what that road would look like going through them. The quotation here comes from a recent paper published in Sweden. And due to the relative lack of infrastructure in Sweden, they're able to study the impacts of biodiversity with greater accuracy than in a heavily overdeveloped region like southern England. So I'm just going to read it out for you. The impacts of transport infrastructure on wildlife are well described and include loss of habitat, traffic casualties, creation of physical barriers, disturbance by noise, light, and other visual cues, the spread of chemicals, dust, and alien species, changes in hydrology and microclimate, and accidental spills. Most of these impacts extend into the surrounding landscape, leading to degradation and fragmentation of habitats, and for some species to restricted movements, increased mortality, and avoidance of a zone around the infrastructure. Those physical barriers referred to lead to that habitat fragmentation, and the visualization here of what the road might look like, I think, gives a clear illustration of how a barrier would be set between areas of woodland, so that it becomes, I mean, I think that if I were a hare, a badger, a fox, a deer, a bat, I would not be wanting to cross that road. I would turn away, and then you get the populations in more and more isolated pockets, which in turn leads to decline. So what does this mean? Well, this study found that the mean bird and mammal abundance in an effect zone around infrastructure is reduced by 20 to 30%, with an increasing reduction with proximity to the infrastructure. So heavily impacted. You can imagine a kind of a kill zone really around the road where biodiversity and wildlife abundance is greatly diminished. And the study goes on to state that the population densities may be reduced up to 1 kilometre distance for birds and anorans, that's frogs and toads, and up to 5 kilometres for mammals. And this, I think, makes the very limited county council ecology surveys, which are only focused on a narrow 75 to 100 metre corridor from the route orientation, extremely worrying, as they only capture a fraction of the impacted area and wildlife. So here are some of those impacts in summary. Habitat loss, habitat fragmentation with physical barriers, traffic casualties, disturbance from noise and light, the spread of chemical pollutants and alien species from the road effect, degradation of surrounding and remaining habitat, reduction of population densities, reduction in bioabundance, increasing with proximity to the road, and all of this leading to localized extinctions. So here are some concrete examples from our wood. This active badger set is directly on the center line of the road. It was unoccupied for a while, but now it's occupied again with at least 2 or 3 badgers. And certainly they're extremely busy digging. It would be completely destroyed by the road project. And I'm sure it's not the only such set along the route that would be impacted. And from observation, we know that we have not only badgers, but foxes, 3 species of deer, 10 species of bat, at least 3 species of owl, various raptors, rabbits, mice, hare. There is abundant wildlife, there is abundant bird life. So I wanted to say something about the Barbastelle bats, which I'm sure you will have heard about, and hopefully you will have seen the presentation by Lottie Packman, which Andrew circulated. And I wanted to talk about why this has become such a key issue. So between June and August of 2019, one of the woodland owners borrowed static bat detectors from the Norfolk Bat Survey to gather our own data on the bat population. We were concerned that the council's bat surveys, which had only been running for 2 months prior to the route decision being made in July 2019, had been inadequate in scale and inadequate in the terms of their duration to inform that route decision. And we really wanted to find out what was in our woodlands to have a better idea. Our initial results from the borrowed equipment indicated the presence of multiple bat species. And you can see them listed there from one of the summaries of the results from one of those surveys. And this included then the rare and highly protected Barbastelle bat. With this knowledge, we made a Freedom of Information request to the council for their survey data. This was refused. So we went to the Eastern Daily Press with our data and with the story of this refusal. As a result of this publicity, I was contacted by Dr. Charlotte Packman of Wild Wings Ecology. She's a Barbastelle bat expert based at UEA, who was keen to find out more about our data survey. So Dr. Packman came to visit the woods to assess likely roosting sites and analyse the data we gathered in more detail with the help of Norfolk Bat Survey. At very short notice, she organised a trapping and radio tracking survey with her team from Wild Wings Ecology. The photos you can see here are from that evening. It was on the 31st of July 2019. They were successful in radio tagging 2 female Barbastelles and were able to track them back to a nearby and previously unknown maternity roost. These results have led to an ongoing crowd-funded survey, which is far more extensive than anything being done by the council, it has to be said. So the way they went about this, they set up, I think it was 5 quite large mist nets, which the bats would fly into their very fine net, so the bats are unharmed so long as they're expertly disentangled. The bats were then taken in a small bag, they're examined, and if appropriate, they were tagged and or they were sort of measured and weighed and all of this sort of thing. And you can see being handled there a Barbastelle bat. So why is this important? The Barbastelle bat is near threatened globally on the IUCN Red List, and it's listed as vulnerable to extinction on the Mammal Society Red List. What's been discovered by Wild Wings Ecology is a nationally important population, a super colony centred in the area that the road goes through. The Norwich Western Link cuts through the combined core sustenance zones of multiple colonies, and these are shown in yellow on the map on the right here. These are the core sustenance zones. These are where these colonies go and feed on a nightly basis. A newly discovered maternity colony and multiple roosting trees have been identified on the route by Wild Wings Ecology. So this is set against our continued concerns about the inadequacy of the survey work being done by the council's contractors. The route decision, as I've already said, was taken after only 2 months of bat survey work, which doesn't seem adequate to inform that route decision. In fact, I don't think they really had any data at that stage to inform that decision. Dangerous practices were identified in the bat ecology contractors, which included endangering pregnant bats by trapping them at the wrong time of year and not following COVID protocols. This led to an intervention by Natural England. Limited bat trapping and static detector surveys, as I've already mentioned, because of the way the surveys have been focused on the very narrow construction corridor and not the wider landscape, not the wider habitat. And incomplete ecology surveys. For example, no nesting bird surveys have been carried out at all so far. So they don't know what birds are nesting in those woods, and they're not planning to carry out any of those surveys until I think later this year. And the bat trapping surveys were apparently, they were rescheduled for, I think, August and September, and then they were, as far as we can tell, not actually carried out. So all of that is of continued concern. I'm going to say a few things about biodiversity net gain, which you will have heard the council and people like Martin will be talking about biodiversity net gain, trotting out this phrase at every given opportunity. This term comes from DEFRA's new metric on how to achieve a net gain in biodiversity when developing on greenfield sites. In essence, it reduces the biodiversity of an area of land to a number, a value, which is then compensated elsewhere in the landscape with, I think, the increase in biodiversity is supposed to be +10. It was never really intended for endangered species or for complex habitats like woodlands and or ancient woodlands, as these quotations from an article in Inside Ecology illustrate. No one pretends that a simple metric score could capture all the effects of land use change on rare and common species and habitats, or the effects of changes in habitat connectivity. Biodiversity net gain does not take specific account of particular notable or protected species or habitats or designated sites. Effects on individual species are not recognized in the metric. So it seems that the metrics of biodiversity net gain really aren't intended for situations such as providing mitigation for rare bat species like the Barbastelle bat, and would be inadequate to the task. Norfolk Wildlife Trust are concerned about Norfolk County Council's repeated claims that it can achieve biodiversity net gain when mitigating for the road. In an open letter last year to the Department of Transport, they say that whilst the DEFRA metric has a role to play in quantifying habitat loss impacts previously neglected in planning applications, it's not an appropriate tool for considering the impacts on a wide range of protected species dependent on mature habitats. And the new planting offered by the council to replace those areas of mature habitats cannot replace the habitats lost or provide for the many protected species currently dependent on them. So the presence of rare and protected species in our woods make them even more special than we had realised as owners. And certainly the road should not be going anywhere near such an important habitat. So I'm going to end with this quotation from Norfolk Wildlife Trust. The rarity of the species present means that this woodland is likely to be of national importance. I think such a statement highlights that really having the road going through the woodland is madness. And that's why we've been fighting so hard to try to prevent that from happening.
Thank you very much, Iain. I'll just stop the recording.
Do I need to hand control back over